Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Good morning and welcome to Thursday. Welcome to the program. I am Larry Fedoruk, sitting in for Mike Farwell. Mike, as you know, if you're a Rangers fan, is traveling with the team on those long road trips. I get to come in and fill in for Mike Farwell. And what a game last night, huh? I hope you were listening on 570 News Radio, and the Rangers, I was going to say, eke out a victory, I guess, because what a shootout into 15 different stages of the shootout. I mean, but a victory at the end of it, and that's you know, the shootout, the long shootout, and all that, and the comeback from being down 4-1. That's all going to be talked about, I guess, in postseason. But really, it's the W beside this game that is very important right now. So anyway, go Rangers, go next game tomorrow night there in Flint, and that'll be here on 570 News Radio as well, and you'll hear Mike and Paul on that. In the meantime, in for Mike Farwell on his talk show this morning. It's difficult for me to start the day today as somebody who's been in news radio as a talk show host for years. I'm not a journalist, I'm a talk show host, but in news. And I watch news still because it's my interest, not only what I did for many years. When you begin a day with the story of a tragedy, and I'm talking, of course, about the mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. between an American Airlines passenger flight and a military helicopter. And certainly the news coverage that I've been watching and listening to has been wall-to-wall on this particular disaster. And I understand that, but it's difficult. I always feel, and I realized, you know, we lose humanity on a daily basis worldwide. And there's always a disturbance in the force, if I may use that term, when we lose members of the human race, I guess is what I'm saying. And and I realize this happens every day. There's natural disasters all around the world. There are fires, there are floods, there are wars there that take lives, and these are tragic, of course. But when, for me at least, when it's an everyday occurrence, and by an everyday occurrence I mean a flight from one city to another, from Wichita to Washington, there are thousands and thousands of these flights every day. Across states, across provinces, across countries, flights here and there. And by and large, of course, airline travel statistically is very safe and all of that kind of thing. I'm not saying that, but when something like this, it's just an everyday occurrence. It's a flight. It's an airline flight. And a tragedy happens and so many lives are changed suddenly and forever. I find it difficult. I don't know. I find it difficult to... maybe cope is too strong a word, because we do cope, we do move on, but we just kind of understand what just happened. And I don't mean in the sense of investigation, because that is, of course, what is going to go on. These investigations are in-depth and thorough and go on a long time to find out what exactly happened. You notice that there are still people who use the term accident, but the term accident is not used much anymore, and that is purposely. It's not used even in traffic, on the roads. It's not an accident. Something somewhere is responsible for this particular event. This is not about blame. This is about trying to find out why this happened. So it's kind of a philosophical thing that's been practically applied to news coverage, where they don't call it an accident. So it's not an accident. Something happened, and it'll be investigated so that the chances of it happening again are slim or none, you know. But so there were 64 souls on the American Airlines flight. There were 60 passengers, 4 crew. There were 3 Army personnel on the Black Hawk helicopter. They have said that they recovered 27 bodies from the Potomac River. And interesting that the Reagan International Airport, where this happened, the American Airlines flight was on approach for a landing of just a normal landing, and it was on course at Reagan International Airport. like I said, hundreds a day. It's a very busy airport. The airport is kind of, I don't know how to put it, downtown. I've never flown into Washington, D.C., but the airport's kind of downtown. As you're flying in, it's people who have flown into Washington, D.C. always remark about, or at least flying into Reagan, that, out of the plane, you see the Capitol, you see the Washington Monument, the Potomac, and, these landmark spots in the nation's capital of the United States. And that's where it is. It's very close. It's very accessible. Obviously a lot of government employees, including elected officials, senators and Congress people and all of that, of course, they fly into Reagan and have access right to their work, if you will, very close to the airport, and that's intentional. It's amazing to me that I mean, it's a tragedy as it is, don't get me wrong, but to think about it, that this didn't hit any urban areas. This fell into the Potomac. It happened above the Potomac, and the two aircraft fell into the Potomac. And the disaster was limited to the people on the two aircraft. So in that sense, it's something to think about, that I've been thinking about this morning. And because it's right downtown. If it happened a few seconds earlier or later, there's hard to tell what would have been the consequences. It's tragic as it is, loss of life. The Washington, D.C., as you may have known, because of the inaugural events and everything there, is under winter right now, as we are. It's cold. The Potomac has ice in it, and very cold, made operations very difficult for the first responders who were there very quickly. This happened about 8:48, is what they precisely say last night, is when they got the call that there was a crash. And it's something like 11 minutes or less where there were boats in the water and responders right there at that scene. And I don't know about you, but I didn't hear about it last night. I was sort of at some point, you kind of turn off, and I heard about it first thing this morning. So that would have been about 10 hours after the disaster, the crash happened. When you see even the distant footage of the explosion in the sky, and then the quickly the explosion, this fireball falling quickly to the ground, in this case the Potomac actually, and then 10 hours later in this icy water, I'm surprised that they took 10 hours to declare it a search and recovery instead of a search and rescue. For 10 hours, they called it a search and rescue, and really fought bravely, all the first responders, to try and rescue anybody that might have survived. Although when you see that explosion and the few thousand feet that would have fallen into icy waters and been there, it's hard to believe that it was ever a search and rescue, but they did their best. So just I thought if I just get it out in the open, maybe I can get past it a little bit and stop thinking about it this morning, because, as I said, it's just one of those everyday occurrences. An airline disaster airline flight is an everyday occurrence. Airline disaster is not, but it is a result of one, and for me, particularly difficult. All right, let us move on, because we do have I think a very interesting show planned for you today. I'll tell you what's coming up on the Mike Farwell Show in just a moment. I'm Larry Fedoruk, in for Mike today. This is 570 News Radio. I'm Larry Fedoruk, in for Mike Farwell today. Coming up on the show, hope you can stick around. An interesting show lined up. What are we, a day away, 2 sleeps away from tariffs, I guess? Is that right? February 1st, looks like they're coming. Although yesterday, I don't know if you followed any of the confirmation hearings, the RFK for home and health were brutal. I'd be amazed if he gets confirmed. But the more, I guess, relevant one to us was a confirmation hearing of Howard Lutnick, who is a Wall Street billionaire who Trump tapped to be the Secretary of Commerce. That would be the department that, and Howard Lutnick is also pro-tariffs. That's why Trump said, yeah, you'll be my Secretary of Commerce. He spoke a little bit about tariffs. And the way Howard Lutnick put it, if you saw any of that yesterday, was that as far as Canada goes anyway, it's still kind of on the table. I know that we're anticipating, and I guess we should be anticipating and prepared for the worst, which is wall-to-wall tariffs on everything come Saturday morning. But the way the Secretary of Commerce, or the soon-to-be Secretary of Commerce, put it was that we're still negotiating, And Trump's remarks about the migrants and the criminals and the fentanyl that's coming across the border, it's interesting that it's so little fentanyl goes from Canada to the U.S. as compared from Mexico to the U.S. And there's also fentanyl that comes from the U.S. into Canada. I don't know if that's the criteria. In other words, if we tighten our borders, then we won't have tariffs. Well, I don't think our border with the United States is the problem. Although we've certainly made moves to do just that, to tighten the border for illegal migrants and also for any illegal trafficking, whether it be drugs or something else. When you think about the number of guns that come into Canada from the United States, this should be the issue, not that somehow the fentanyl problem in the United States is because of Canada. Geez, I don't think so. And if this is going to lead to tariffs and trade wars and causing us to just pay more for everything, it's over something that's actually not true. It's ridiculous. Well, we'll see. So, having said all that, we are 2 sleeps away from possible tariffs. And one of the things we talk about immediately when we talk about tariffs in Canada is the auto sector, because so many parts move across the border, and as we've heard, sometimes several times, back and forth before the final assembly is done in wherever it's done, right? How will these tariffs affect the auto industry in Canada? Just after 9:30, coming up shortly. Hope you can stick around. Dave Adams is going to join us. David Adams is the CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada. And he and I are going to have a chat about the tariffs coming up just after 9:30. At 10 o'clock this morning, we're going to focus here on day 2 of the provincial election campaign in Ontario. We are going to focus on the federal election, if you will. And to get there, the Liberals need a new leader. So there is that race that we're looking at. And if we had talked about this a year ago, I think everybody would have said Chrystia Freeland. Mark Carney said, yeah, I'm in. And I'm an outsider. Whether he really is or not is up for debate. I get that. But with Carney in the race, he seems to now have the early edge in the federal leadership. And, you can ask, will that change anything? Well, it doesn't matter who the leader is. The government's going down. There'll be a non-confidence vote. There'll be an election. And the Conservatives are leading in the polls right now. So is that it? I don't know. But Mark Carney has an edge. Doesn't mean he doesn't have obstacles. So we're going to have that conversation at 10 o'clock this morning. Sam Routley is a PhD candidate at Western in political science. He's going to join us this morning at 10 o'clock, and we'll talk about Mark Carney and the federal Liberal leadership race. Also later on this morning in our 11 o'clock hour, we'll talk with Enes Akbari, adjunct professor, Department of Applied Psychology at the U of T. We're going to talk about staff shortages when it comes to daycare. Ontario seems to be, even though we have some of the lowest requirements for staffing at daycare in Canada, we have a staff shortage. So where's that $10 a day daycare? It's in jeopardy. This deal that's up in I think mid-2026 that we have with the feds and money coming in, where is all of that? And where are, how come we have staff shortages which are jeopardizing people's chances at affordable daycare? And in fact, many parents now are on these long waiting lists, not being able to find affordable daycare. So that's something else we're going to talk about this morning. Don't forget, it's the Flipside on Thursdays. At 11:30 this morning, we ask on the flip side just kind of a fun question, and we throw it out there and get your responses on the flip side coming up at 11:30. Today's question, by the way, I'll give you a sneak preview. Think about your best or worst car you've ever had. For me, I think my best and worst are kind of the same car. I'll get into that on the flip side at 11:30. It's Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. This is 570 News Radio. Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Hey, by the way, if you've been following social at all, I'm on Blue Sky now as well, which I'm kind of enjoying. I still visit X occasionally, but I got the same problems with X that a lot of people have these days. But so, I'm on a few sites, and I've been noticing a lot of response to the resignation on CNN of Jim Acosta. Do you know Jim Acosta? No? Jim Acosta was a reporter who covered the White House during the first Trump administration. And was basically, I think, one of Donald Trump's biggest irritants. I mean, they really got into it back and forth. Acosta really took him on a lot of issues. And Trump, of course, would name him, worst reporter ever, and all this kind of stuff. And then after all that, Acosta ended up doing various other assignments. He ended up having a news anchor show at 10 o'clock every morning, which he just resigned very publicly at the end of the show. I didn't see it, although I often have CNN on. I didn't see it, but of course it just went viral that, fight the tyranny, don't put up with the lies, fight the good fight kind of words that he said at the end. I'm leaving. And apparently what he was offered was a late night slot. And he said, instead of taking that, I'm quitting. I'm leaving CNN. Okay. Listen, and people have been like, Jim Acosta, the hero, CNN, it's BS. And what I just want to say, if you did follow any of this on social or on CNN, when Jim Acosta came on at 10 o'clock, I used to switch the channel to anything. Oh, look, Matlock is on. Like, I would watch anything. Jim Acosta, I think, is a terrific individual. He's a highly principled person, I think. I think he was a great reporter. But sometimes a great reporter is not a great news anchor. I just found his show terrible, to the point where I would sit there every day as a student of news and news media. I would sit there and go, how is this guy having a show? Because I bet you nobody's watching, because I don't know how to put it. He was just terrible. He was just terrible. And I think that's why he's gone, because he wasn't very good. And they wanted to reassign him, put him in a late night somewhere. So I don't think it's the issue that people are making it to be on social. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Jim Acosta, for what it's worth, or for what anybody might care about Jim Acosta or CNN. How will the proposed tariffs out of the United States affect the Canadian auto industry? That topic is next here on 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Welcome back to the program. Coming up after 10 o'clock this morning, we're going to be talking about Mark Carney. Slight edge right now. Maybe some will say more than a slight edge in his race for leader of the federal Liberals. But that doesn't mean it's a shoo-in. That doesn't mean there are many obstacles on the road ahead. And we're going to talk about that with a PhD candidate, political science, Western University, Sam Routley, joining us after 10 o'clock. Don't forget, 11:30, it's the flip side, where we're going to throw out a fun question for you, as we do every Thursday. And then between noon and 1, the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. And even before all that, we'll have plenty of opportunities for you to call in. Whenever we have a gap there, please call in and share your thoughts on the issues of the day, things we're talking about, and things that you're thinking about, both. You can include those throughout the morning as well here on the Mike Farwell Show. I'm Larry Fedoruk. We're 2 sleeps away from tariffs, we think. Donald Trump tariffs, some say across the board on Canadian products. How would tariffs affect the auto industry? The auto industry, that's one of the first things that comes up when we talk about tariffs. We talk about how much we might pay at the grocery store, and hey, what about the auto industry? Well, on that issue, our guest is CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada. David Adams is joining us. Good morning, David. Hey, David, are you there?
I am. How are you?
I am good. Nice to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. I understand that there was already a review of trade relations between Canada and the U.S., and a report was due in April. Is that correct?
Yeah, what the president did last week and his inauguration day was signed, as I think everybody's aware, a number of executive orders. One of them related to trade, and part of that executive order was to evaluate trade deficits, why they're in place, other trade-related measures, and then come back with a report at the beginning of April. And part of that was, I think, the consideration of putting in place tariffs potentially at that point in time if the investigation suggested that needed to be done.
So what does that tell us? Does that tell us that maybe auto industry or some trade tariffs might not happen until April, or that this is coming in ahead of a report or an investigation that's underway?
Well, I think we can get maybe some sense of that from the confirmation hearings, I think yesterday, of the Secretary of Commerce. He was asked about the tariffs, and his comments were those tariffs could potentially be in two phases. When the president-elect at the time first made the comments about a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, the rationale for looking at that 25% tariff was not necessarily trade-related, but more issues related to illegal migrants coming across the border and fentanyl coming across the border. And I think yesterday the new Commerce Secretary was basically saying, well, there are potentially two phases of the tariffs, one related to the border and then one related to what might come out of the investigations that would result in reports in April 1st. And his comments with respect to the border issue were if Canada and Mexico kind of did their work, put in place to improve security along the borders, then, there may not be tariffs. But, the reality is it's sort of like jump, but we don't know how high we have to jump before we're considered having met the threshold of securing the border. So I think, maybe that's a good way of looking at it, that there are two potential phases for tariffs. Saturday, which everybody is concerned about, of course, and that's maybe more related to the border, and then tariffs potentially, another set of tariffs potentially coming into place sometime after April 1st.
I'm glad you mentioned Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, because I watched with interest too his comments and was somewhat looking at them like saying, okay, maybe the dreaded Saturday morning tariffs aren't necessarily the way it's going to play out. In the meantime, either way, are there contingency plans within the auto industry for A, B, or C, or any of these scenarios?
Well, I think that's part of the challenge, that nobody really knows how many scenarios there are, because I think aside from the potential tariffs around getting the border sorted out and just general tariffs that have been contemplated with respect to addressing trade deficits, then there's also, if we wind the clock way back, the initial tariff threat that the president issued around a sort of a 10% across-the-board tariff against everybody for anything coming into the United States. So there's a third tranche of tariffs there. But, to your question, I think all industries in Canada have been sort of aware of the potential tariff threat for some time. And, whether it's the auto industry or any other industry, have been doing their best to put in place contingency plans. What exactly those look like, for my two manufacturing members, those haven't been shared with me. But I think rest assured they've been doing their homework and trying to plan for all the different scenarios that we're aware of. And obviously we can't plan for those, or they can't plan for those that we're not aware of, but still may exist out there.
In a worst case, I think you were mentioning in one article that some of the manufacturers may have to slow down production if the tariffs hit and if they're high, and that would be the worst case because that would really affect employment and a lot of other things. So you don't want to do that, right?
Yeah, well, sure. And I think that's the worst case scenario. And, theoretically, it's not just not theoretically, in actuality, it's not just the production facility, but it's all the suppliers that feed into that production facility. And, the numbers are, for every manufacturing job in a manufacturing facility, there are potentially 6 to 8 jobs in the broader economy that are dependent on that manufacturing facility. So it would have a ripple effect throughout, throughout certainly the automotive ecosystem and the economy generally.
Sure would. Well, it's like with the first Trump term. You kind of wake up every morning going, "Okay, what?" It's hard. It's hard to really know what to expect, but I'm glad to hear that people are, making contingency plans and well aware of all the different things that could happen. David Adams, thanks for your time this morning, David. All the best.
Thanks for having me, Larry.
David Adams is CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada. We're talking about potential tariffs. I want to revisit a couple of things that he said that we've talked about, that maybe the future isn't that dark when it comes to slapping all kinds of tariffs on Canada. Maybe. Are we hoping against hope here? Anyway, we'll cover those couple of things and talk more about this. Get your thoughts as well in a minute here on 570 News Radio.
The reality is it's sort of like jump, but we don't know how high we have to jump before we're considered having met the threshold of securing the border. So I think, maybe that's a good way of looking at it, that there are two potential phases for tariffs. Saturday, which everybody is concerned about, of course, and that's maybe more related to the border, and then tariffs potentially, another set of tariffs potentially coming into place sometime after April 1st.
It's David Adams, my guest. I'm Larry Fedoruk, in for Mike Farwell today. David Adams is the CEO of Global Automakers of Canada. We're talking about the potential tariffs. So that was the two things that we mentioned. One was the you heard there from David is the phases, because as we talked about, and I think this is key, and I didn't know this till this morning until talking to David and reading about what David had said previously about proposed tariffs. I don't think many of us noticed in all the executive orders that Trump had signed on his first, second, third day in office, was that one of them was a review of trade regulations between the nations, and I assume between the U.S. and other nations, but certainly between the U.S. and Canada, a review. And I think a lot of people are saying this about a lot of Trump moves, like, okay, Trump wants to possibly get rid of FEMA. And people go, oh, that's Trump, and we need FEMA. Well, other people are saying, FEMA needs to be looked at. It needs to be revamped. We need to look at the way we hand out money. So if you buy that, and it's difficult to buy that when we're talking about Donald Trump, but if you buy that, shall we say, then you can say, well, maybe that's what's happening. Maybe the big threat is I'm going to get rid of FEMA. But maybe the reality is that they revamp it and look for efficiencies and make it better. Okay, apply that sort of state of mind, if we can, if possible, to trade regulations. Maybe trade regulations do need to be looked at between our two countries, not just by them, but by us. Maybe it's not all the way it should be. Well, if we take that and we try and take a positive out of that, which is what our guest David Adams of the Automakers of Canada said, it's like one of the executive orders he signed was, let's look at trade regulations and let's look at deficits and let's see how we can fix them. And that report is due in April. So why would you slap across the board tariffs Saturday morning, February 1st, when in fact you have a report coming out in a couple of months? You know, for a government report from now to coming out in April, in 2 months, 2.5 months, that's actually pretty quick for governments, right? It's not, sometime in 2027 no, it's April. So why not wait till April? So that number one bodes kind of well for proposed tariffs on Saturday. And the other thing, I said two things. One was that review that's been already called for by the president himself. And secondly is the comments by Trump's pick, who will be confirmed, Howard Lutnick, the Wall Street billionaire who had his confirmation hearing yesterday, Secretary of Commerce, spoke about a couple of levels of tariffs and there's things we're looking at and kind of made the tariffs, as implied at the beginning, contingent on Canada's control of the border vis-a-vis migrants or illegal drugs. So it's, that's how this started, not so much as a trade deficit or whatever. Trump campaigned on and kind of said, if Canada and Mexico are going to be sending illegal migrants and fentanyls into the country, maybe I put trade tariffs on them. That's kind of what he said. It was like trade tariffs wasn't related to maybe, flaws in the trading system or deficits in the trading system. It seemed to be related to drugs and migrants. So if we do that, which we have, and we prove that we can, I mean, even yesterday, and probably today as well, but even yesterday, Melanie Joly was in Washington, D.C., talking with Marco Rubio, who's Secretary of State. And Secretary of State is involved in matters of international relations and diplomacy. So maybe there is something there. Maybe there is this concerted effort that may in fact pay off. Hard to say, but this is one of the things I want to talk about on the show later and tomorrow as well is what it's like dealing with a second Trump term. Well, this is it. He's been in office about 10 days or so, and this is it. This is the 4 years. Good luck to all of us, right? It's the Mike Farwell Show. I'm Larry Fedoruk. Back in a moment here on 570 News Radio. Well, the voice of reason is traveling with the Rangers, so I'm the voice of whatever. Yes, Larry Fedoruk, filling in once again from Mike Farwell. Thanks for having me on 570 News Radio. Always enjoy my time filling in here. Here's Andre. Andre, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Good morning, Larry.
Good morning.
Beautiful day out there today.
Yes, sir.
I got two things. Since you're a host and not a journalist, I heard that earlier. One is I'm going to start by the good news. As you were talking about the Kitchener Rangers, I was hoping that they were going to make till the goalie and Chevelle would have did the last goal of the shutout. That would have been awesome. A goalie, right?
Right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
You were talking about fentanyls, and I'm going to add the gun especially, right? That's more serious, about the border and, the tariff and all that stuff. So I was just thinking, as a talk show about Pat King, Mr. Pat King, with the blockade. They really knew how to block the border, so why don't we get him to help us deal with this instead of 1,500 soldiers or planes or a helicopter? Because that guy seems very educated and very smart. What do you think?
Well, I don't think he's blocking the border in the same way we need the border blocked or who we need it blocked against, I guess. I don't know if I'd...
the trucks won't be coming in and out no more, but he does have a global visual of things, right? Like this was a masterpiece that he did, and in a positive way, except for honking in Ottawa, right? That was just, but that's how a strike works. You got to make noise, right? But I'm just thinking of that guy because politicians, I don't believe in the terror tax, terror, whatever you want to call it. I just think that's just being a bully, right? But yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. I was just thinking about Mr. Pat King. He did a lot for us. Thank you, Larry. Talk to you later.
All right, man. Thanks for the call. I really, that's an interesting POV. I guess I don't know if I'd hire Pat King for anything, frankly. I don't think it's hardly the same thing at all. And it was, the border that it's the border that's just being sort of positioned or painted as wide open is really not that between Canada and the U.S. where all the criminals and bad things are going back and forth all the time. I don't think that's correct. It's not perfect, but it's not wide open. Who do we have here? We have Robbie. Is that Robbie? Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm a regular calling into Mike. I'm just on my way to work, so I'm just going to say a couple of things about this whole tangerine idiot stupidity with all these threats and we're going to do this to Canada, blah, blah, blah. Riddle me this, Batman. Where do all the guns from Toronto come from? They come from the States. Where do all the migrants and immigrants that cross the border in Quebec come from and to? They come from America into Canada. Where does fentanyl come from? It comes from Asia. So we're the only ones that have a West Coast border. Excuse me, that's my alarm. All these things that he's saying that we're doing, as in you've got to close your border to stop this and stop that. Okay, so we'll do that and stop all the supposed fentanyl from BC and supposed migrants that are crossing in Saskatchewan, which, you put one on the news and suddenly there's 1,000 of them coming from Canada. Nobody wants to go from Canada to America. Nobody wants to be in America. They all want to be in Canada.
Robbie, thanks for the call. I'm tight for time here. Robbie, thanks for the call, though. Always great call. This is 570 News.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Welcome to Hour 2 of the program. Coming up after 10:30 this morning, a little more on tariffs because I did a little research into the almighty American dollar, which may, in fact, preclude American manufacturing because that's part of what's the heart of this tariff issue is Donald Trump saying, if you want to come, make your stuff in the United States, fine. But if you're making it elsewhere, we're going to charge you tariffs for selling it in the United States. Well, if you look at history, which is important. So we'll talk about that a little after 10:30 this morning. Right now on the program, I know we're focused on the Ontario election. That's coming up in about a month's time here. But after that, federal politics, March 24th, Parliament will resume with a new Liberal leader, a new Prime Minister. And then we expect the dissolution of Parliament and a federal election, I guess, sooner than later. We'll see. Right now, Mark Carney has the edge in the federal Liberal leadership race. But what are the obstacles ahead for Mark Carney or for Chrystia Freeland or the Liberal Party? Here to discuss is our guest, a PhD candidate in political science at Western University. Sam Routley is joining us. Hello, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Harry.
Mark Carney does, in fact, have an edge right now. He seems to have a bit of an edge and a lot of support from a lot of ministers and things like that. How did he get that edge sort of coming in quickly as he did?
Sure, yeah. When I think we talk about edge, it's based off of what kind of a leadership race this is. So it's a very short one, which means that you really don't have too much time for narratives to build. A sort of candidate who's not already in the lead doesn't really have that space to grow momentum. And so it means that organization the question of who can simply get the greatest amount of supporters to vote is really the one who wins. And it seems like Carney has that edge because he's gotten the support of cabinet ministers, and you can assume that sort of provides him with, a far superior kind of organizational network than Freeland or any of the other challengers has. I mean, in terms of what gives Carney that edge, I think the general sense is that, the Trudeau government is very unpopular. I think Canadians as a whole and sort of Liberal Party members more recently have sort of come to the conclusion that, we sort of have to move on from that era. And I think Carney, more than Freeland or really anyone else, kind of represents some element of change that the Liberals can work with.
He labeled himself an outsider, although I think that's up for debate. And I don't know if you saw him on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart a week or 10 days ago, but that he basically said, I am an outsider. And I wonder if that's partly it, that whole idea of he's somewhat distant from the administration of the past 10 years almost, as opposed to Christian, who was right there, who was part of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Carney sort of embodies the drawbacks, but also the strengths of being an outsider. Because I think he has that outsider status in the sense that he's able to sort of say, I'm not a partisan guy. I'm a pragmatic, accomplished, former governor of the Bank of Canada and the UK, and I'm the sort of person to address the challenges of today. But the negative aspect of that is that he simply sort of lacks the political experience and the political skills that you might need in today's position, wherein the Liberals are 20% behind the Conservatives in the polls. I think that even though Carney and the Liberals are making the case that this is a sort of a guy that has a lot of policy success and can bring that into government, I think that most Canadians, given their deep-seated discontent with the status quo and the way things are going, sort of don't buy that argument. They don't necessarily see how, even though Carney doesn't have any sort of partisan political experience, someone who's still very much a part of the political establishment, we can say, the sort of technocratic establishment, that he just doesn't stand for that change that they'd like to see. At least that's the mood, it seems.
The Liberals have had outsiders before who've gone on to very historical tenures as leaders and as prime ministers. The exception would be Michael Ignatieff, who was just a failure as a choice. Where are we? Are we back in the days of Lester Pearson, where Carney could really make a difference, or is this another Ignatieff, or neither?
Yeah. Like you mentioned, it's been a pretty common strategy for the Liberals to, especially at moments where they're in a sort of unpopular period and they're starting to kind of get a bit stale, that they tend to reach outside. So Mackenzie King came in from labor relations. Pearson came in from sort of diplomacy, and Trudeau Senior, I should say, who was in his prior life a sort of parochial Quebec intellectual, was brought in to the Liberal Party in 1965 to bring it some life, and that was tried with Ignatieff as the sort of academic, which failed, and now it seems like Carney is in that mold, to say we'll bring in someone from banking. I mean, I think what we're looking at here is outside of Carney's particular abilities, whether or not it's simply enough to buck the trend, that we're dealing with a lot of widespread anti-establishment sentiment, a desire for change, and with assuming we're looking at an election in the spring or in the summer, no real time to start over to build that pushback if you're speaking to the Liberals. I think if we're looking after the election and perhaps the leader that comes in, after a poly majority government is formed, then it might be a different conversation, and perhaps someone like Carney or someone from a similar kind of outside point of perspective can perhaps adjust things.
I'm almost out of time here. As a matter of fact, I am. But one quick question. Jagmeet Singh kind of indicated yesterday like there might be a little cracked door open for some NDP support. Could we, in fact, see some NDP support and maybe limp the government through to a summer recess and a fall election?
Yeah.
Would that be possible? And would that be better for the Liberals or worse?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of up in the air. I'm not so sure. I think that Singh and the New Democrats sort of backed themselves in the corner in the fall when they said that they would not support any Liberal government, regardless of who the leader was. And I mean, I think the out there, the justification is to say the Trump tariff threat sort of creates enough of a national crisis that the government sort of needs to stay in power, or at least Parliament needs to sit for a few months to kind of bring in responsive measures. Obviously, there's a certain level of hypocrisy there, but in terms of the political calculations, I think they're there, and so you might see a fall election. And I mean, does that help the Liberals? I think there's a situation in which it does, because it sort of gives Carney, assuming he's the prime minister here, an opportunity to kind of get used to power, get used to politics. But at the same time, there's a world in which it hurts the Liberals because it sort of makes them look a tad bit arrogant in the sense that they deserve power, and that's sort of been the theme for the past few months, right?
Right. That has been a problem for them for more than that, I think. But interesting. Sam Routley, thank you for your time. Very insightful and informative. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sam Routley is a PhD candidate, political science at Western University. More in a moment here on 570 News Radio.
Assuming we're looking at an election in the spring or in the summer, no real time to start over to build that pushback if you're speaking to the Liberals. I think if we're looking after the election and perhaps the leader that comes in, after a poly majority government is formed, then it might be a different conversation, and perhaps, someone like Carney or someone from a similar kind of outside point of perspective can perhaps adjust things.
Just moments ago, we were talking with Sam Routley. He's a PhD candidate in political science at Western University, talking about the federal Liberal leadership race and the edge that Mark Carney has right now in that race. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Thanks to Sam, some interesting thoughts and opinions there on that, when there's a federal or leadership race, for a political party is different than an election race. An election is a lot about image and hype and who's electable and general messaging and slogans, and especially lately, slogans. So there's that, where the leadership race is more substantive in a lot of cases. It's like who can garner the support, who do we like, who's good in the meetings, who knows what, how smart is this person. And of course, then also what they have to look at is, when we go to an election, how electable is that person when it comes to slogans and hype and general messaging, right? So you can be the smartest guy in the room, which allegedly Michael Ignatieff was, but you're just not electable. And, I've often said, as far as the leader and who you want, you don't want the smartest guy in the room. No, you want, it's famously FDR in the States was a C student and had very little knowledge of the issues. But what FDR knew is what he didn't know. He knew what he didn't know, and he knew who to get and get the experts and pull America out of a Dust Bowl depression. So, you don't want the smartest guy in the room, is my point. You want the guy who knows what we need and hires the smartest people in the rooms to come into his room, if you will, and get things done. So where does Mark Carney play into that? I don't know. Listen, Mark Carney, I knew, of course, who he was, and I'd seen him at various things, and on news clips and things, talking about the Bank of Canada and, of course, the Bank of England when he ran that for a number of years. And I knew his story. I knew that he, you often think of people high in the sort of the economics world and banking as people of privilege, and he's done all right for himself. But he was born in the Northwest Territories, grew up there in Edmonton, His dad fished. It was very humble beginnings, which I think bodes well. I think that story should be told more, even now. I would see him talk about banking and economics and interest rates and prime rates and trade and okay, seems like a smart guy. Then I see him on The Daily Show 10 days ago, and I just like, okay, that's the Mark Carney that I think people should know. If in fact you're interested in who is going to lead the Liberals. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you just, F them all. If you're one of those people, it doesn't matter. But I looked at that and I'm like, where's that Mark Carney? And then days later, he makes it official. He's at this press conference in Edmonton, and he's like the banker, Mark Carney again. And I'm like, okay, no, be that other guy, that affable guy with a smart sense of humor, good talker, all that stuff, having fun, person you wouldn't mind having a beer with, that guy, I think right now, even in the Liberal leadership race, never mind an election that he may have to go through in the coming weeks or months, I think that's the guy they should be bringing out more. I'm not a political strategist, but that one seems obvious to me, doesn't it? Where's that Mark Carney talking to Jon Stewart? Jon Stewart at the beginning of that show even made fun of the fact that they had Mark Carney on. He kind of made a joke. He goes, we finally got Mark Carney through to great demand, and the audience kind of laughed because nobody wanted Mark Carney. And then he turned into this great guest, right? So, maybe look at that sort of as a metaphor for the Liberal leadership race. Your thoughts on this and more on this topic in just a moment. Back after a quick break, 570 News Radio. Dorikin from Mike Farwell. If you're just joining us the last few minutes, we've been talking about the federal Liberal leadership race. We had Sam Reveley on, poli-sci guy, political scientist, Western University, talking about Mark Carney's edge right now and how this is shaping up federally over the next coming weeks. As soon as we finish it's going on now, but as soon as we finish our provincial vote on the 27th of February, we've got about a month to watch things play out federally, and then see if we're going to have another election. Here's John. John, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to mention in your conversations about Mark Carney, I believe that guy's worth something like $94 billion. So painting him as an everyday average guy may not be doing the average listener a favor when the priorities of somebody who's worth $94 billion aren't the same priorities as the average Canadian. And I find that if we're going to elect this guy, or if the Liberal Party elects this guy, all they're doing is continuing that elitist leadership mindset that's been completely out of touch with average Canadians. I realize that the Liberals likely will not win the next election, but I certainly don't want to paint any of these front runners as any sort of average, normal, shucks Canadian when their priorities are not in line.
Where did you get $94 billion, by the way? I've never heard that number. That's a huge number.
It is, absolutely. I've Googled it a few different times, so I'm basing my information off of Google searches, but that's what I came up with.
All right. Thanks, John. Good point. I mean, and I totally agree. I think that the liberals have had this, limousine liberal label on them, rightfully so, for a number of years. And I think that's part of their problem. And I don't know if they're addressing it. Certainly putting another rich white guy at the top. I don't know that it's 94 billion rich, but nevertheless, but I mean, the point I was making, like Chrystia Freeland is a Ukrainian farm girl from Alberta, right? Mark Carney is a fisherman's kid from Northwest Territories. It's not that they haven't done well or that they're worth, I don't know how much Chrystia Freeland is worth, but I imagine there's 7 figures in their bank accounts there. I think she does all right. Maybe not Mark Carney rich, but nevertheless, if somebody has had simple roots and did well, is that not votable? I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. But I agree with that elitist point of view. That's something.
I think it just puts it out of touch with average Canadians.
I get you, John. Thank you for the call. I got to go. It's 570 News Radio. More in a moment.
Here's special guest host Larry Fedoruk.
Welcome back to the program. Coming up on the show, I want to talk about the U.S. dollar. It is the de facto world currency right now. And does that preclude made in America manufacturing? History might say yes. We'll talk about that in a few minutes' time. Also, and because part of the idea of tariffs that Trump wants to put on Canada and others is that he wants more made in America. Even Biden was a big made in America guy, and we certainly talk about made in Canada, and we're not the de facto world currency, but still, the difference between made in Canada, made in America, and affordable items on the shelves of the grocery stores and hardware stores and clothing stores and so forth, right? So if you got some thoughts on that, I want to talk about that in a few minutes' time. But also, I just want to point out quickly, I don't know if you plan on trying to scope this out or anything, but I was interested to see that this Fire Aid concert has come together as quickly as it has. Fire Aid is tonight. And I believe, I don't know that anybody, for sure that anybody in Canada is picking it up as a broadcast. I know that the streaming services in the United States, many of them, like Amazon Prime, Apple, Disney Plus, those are 3, I think Hulu, but we can't get Hulu up here anyway. There's quite a few streaming services, not Netflix that I know of. Interestingly enough, I guess the biggest, if you will, Netflix wasn't listed among the streaming services carrying this Fire Aid concert. But I also went to my Netflix account this morning and searched Fire Aid as in, is this thing coming up? Are you streaming it live at all? And there was no, it referred me to a bunch of movies with fire in the title, and no thanks. So Fire Aid it's basically in 2 locations. Both are in Inglewood, California, which is kind of a big LA suburb. One is at the Inuit Dome, and the other one is at the Kia Forum in Inglewood. And if you look through the list of people for this Fire Aid, and of course they're comparing it to Live Aid or Farm Aid or any of these things where artists, musicians particularly, come together for a cause, we are looking at Billie Eilish, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Rod Stewart, Stevie Wonder, Sting, Green Day is going to be there, John Fogerty. Somebody said Joni Mitchell is actually going to play. And Joni Mitchell right now isn't as mobile as she was. And there's just been some wonderful, when they did tributes to her, you can still find the videos. They still pop up on social of Joni on stage, seated in a chair, still singing. And that unique voice of hers. I've always been such a big fan of Joni Mitchell. But for Joni Mitchell to say, yeah, I'm going to perform, when it's really not easy for her. Of course, one of her big hits that I've always loved was the song called California. So maybe she does that one, right? But nevertheless, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Earth, Wind, and Fire, which is okay. That's kind of why there's a problem. I'm not trying to be funny here because it's not funny, but even Earth, Wind, and Fire playing, and I guess if they're going to have it at two locations, it'll kind of be back to back. So here's, one act goes on stage at the Forum, and we watch that, and then while they break down the stage and put on the next act there, they can cut over to the, I'm sure that's how it's going to be coordinated. They cut over to the Dome, and somebody else plays there and back and forth. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I mean, I just listed all these acts, even if they all do just a medley or 2, 3, 4 songs each, because they'd have to do at least that. They may not do big, hour-long sets or anything, but to set them up and get them on stage, they're not going to just do one song and one and done. They're going to do a set. So it really should be something. And getting back to the streaming services, so they're going to, I believe, don't quote me on this, but they're going to be open, okay? And I believe also, here's another one we can't get in Canada, even if you wanted to subscribe. It's Peacock, which is the NBC streaming service. But I believe the NBC network is also going to be carrying some of Fire Aid. I mean, a lot of these stars, and during the LA fires, and still today, because it's not over, all the fires aren't out, the reporting has been pretty good at not over-covering the rich people who lost their mansions. And that's unfortunate, too. Because, I mean, Billy Crystal lost his family home that he's been in with his wife since 1979, kids and grandkids and all that. So it's Billy Crystal. He's doing okay. I'm sure he can afford another house somewhere. It's not a big deal. We're not raising money for Billy Crystal or somebody else. But you hear about Billy Crystal and you go, oh, that's sad, because I know also Billy Crystal used to love to collect movie memorabilia. He was in The Princess Bride. He played the wizard. Remember? He saved the hat. He had the hat from when he was a wizard in The Princess Bride. I assume that's gone on a fire. These things are nothing compared to the actual devastation of people without insurance or who lost family members, lives lost. I'm not trying to compare the two. I'm just saying when you hear Billy Crystal, it's kind of sad. But anyway, the media has been pretty good at not covering those, the rich people with mansions, and just covering the actual devastation of, $56 billion worth of damage in the LA fires. So a lot of the stars, though, I actually... you have to Google it and search yourself. It's not just going to come up on the news. What celebrities lost their homes in the LA fires? You have to search it. But when you search it, it's there. It's, Eugene Levy lost his home. There are people. Anyway, so the actual 56 billion plus, I'm sure the number's grown. It's a number I heard early. I'm sure it's grown beyond that. The amount of rebuilding that has to happen at that cost, and a lot of it not insured, because now you live in the Pacific Palisades and there's been a drought and there's Santa Ana winds and there's sparks and there's ignition and oxygen and there's fuel and there's fire. So a lot of insurance companies are saying, okay, we're not going to insure you, which is another entire issue, but we need money. So I'm kind of happy. My point overall is I'm happy that the stars actually come out. No Doubt. And even though No Doubt was still a band, I knew Gwen Stefani was still around. I didn't know No Doubt is going to be there as a band, and should be quite the thing. If you enjoy watching these kind of Farm Aid, Live Aid concerts with multiple different acts, all for a good cause, I mean, it's tonight. It's tonight, and it's going to be for several hours. It's called Fire Aid. Keep an eye out for it if you are into that kind of thing. This is 570 News Radio. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Back in a moment. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. I wanted to talk a little bit about the U.S. dollar and that it's a world currency. And I'm tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to save that for a little later on in the show. We got a whole free hour to talk about different things in our 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. So I'm going to move that segment there. We sort of, in football terms, we have a calling a play at the line here. And let me just exposure here on what happened. Mike Harris was supposed to join us this morning, and then Mike Harris was not going to join us. And then, of course, yes, Mike Harris can join us. So I'm happy to welcome Conservative candidate for the Ontario election coming up soon. Mike Harris is in studio with us. Good morning, Mike.
Larry, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. Sorry about the mix-up.
Hi, thanks. Oh, well, I apologize for the mix-up here, too. And, of course, I'm filling in for Mike, and I actually fill in remotely, so that just added another level of communication.
I know. I'm sitting here in the studio, and I'm watching you on Zoom. It's what a world we live in.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing?
Incredible.
Anyway, enough of that. I'm glad you're here. So now I want to talk about the election, but let's first talk about St. Mary's General Hospital and the Ontario government announcement.
Yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff when it comes to healthcare in the region right now. Of course, we're looking at building our new acute care hospital up on the University Waterloo North campus. We've got some great new diagnostic imaging equipment that's going to be coming to the region as well. A new PET scanner, PET scanner that's really going to assist with cancer care and diagnosis, and a lot of really good things happening.
It's interesting. I was mentioning the other day that I've had some friends and family go through medical stuff lately, and the technology in medicine today is so amazing, and it's really needed. So when you talk about these scanners and things, really, really needed and so necessary to modern medicine, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I think everyone's been touched truly by cancer at some point. So to be able to see care being able to be offered closer to home, where you don't have to have people going down to, say, London or Hamilton or Toronto to get these kinds of treatments, just being able to do it in your own backyard and being comfortable and being able to have family around you, it's such a better experience and quite frankly, outcome for patients.
It's day, I guess, only 2 of the campaign, but as you're out there, what are you hearing about attention to health and healthcare in the province? I know a lot of people say, well, the family doctor situation, but there's levels. There's levels, hospitals, there's equipment, there's staff, there's nurses, there's doctors. What are you hearing out there on the campaign so far? Yeah,
I think the general consensus over the last, we've been out door knocking for a few weeks now, and the general consensus is sort of we need to do better. And I think, up until yesterday, obviously with the writ being drawn up, the government, the PC government has been doing a good job at making those investments and hiring more nurses, opening more medical spots for doctors here in the province. You heard the premier a few weeks ago saying we want to be able to train our own homegrown medical students here. So, we're very blessed in the region to have a partnership with the McMaster University out of Hamilton that does train some doctors here in the region, but we want them to stay here. We want them to learn here, grow here, open their practice here. We just launched an initiative that's going to try and connect every Ontarian with primary care, whether that be a family doctor, nurse practitioner, local family health teams by 2029. So we're making the necessary investments. We're pushing forward and doing what we can from our perspective, and want to work with, of course, our partners here, with our different family health teams, and also with our hospitals, St. Mary's and Grand River, and of course Cambridge Memorial. So I think there's a lot of good things happening. People are seeing the momentum and looking forward to seeing what happens on the flip side of the election, and hopefully, in my case, being able to continue a lot of the good things that we've been doing.
It's interesting you use the term health team. That's a difference I've noticed over these last maybe decade or so, how just going to see a doctor is not the way there's a health team now. You can use pharmacies, you can use nurse practitioners, you can use health teams within a clinic or a hospital. It really, I think that's the model moving forward, is this health team idea. And you need doctors and nurses, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that's what the the idea is, as we move forward, there's a lot of great things that nurse practitioners can do. I can tell you, I've been a huge champion of nurse practitioners here in the region. We've seen a couple of new clinics open. We've hired more nurse practitioners at some of our community care sites out in our townships, and they do a great job. You know, they're supervised by a physician, but they're able to do a lot of that day-to-day work. And, you know, even when you're looking at some of the techs and different folks that work within those family health teams, you know, you don't necessarily need a doctor to give you a needle or to perform skin treatments or different things like that. So they're able to be freed up to see some of those more complex cases. And of course, in turn, that starts to help alleviate some of the backlogs in our hospitals where people are able to get some of those more, we'll just say easier treatments done in clinic rather than having to be at hospital.
This is not your first rodeo, as they say, but here we're into another campaign. How do you feel about campaigns? What are you looking to do, or what are you looking forward to doing in the next few weeks here?
Yeah, feeling pretty good, Larry. You know, we've been out at the doors. I think there's people are very keen on what's happening south of the border. I think when we talk about what we're doing as our PC caucus and PC team to protect Ontario, we want to make sure that we're going to have a stable government in place over the next 4 years to work in collaboration with the Trump administration and the different states, Congress people, senators south of the border, and it sounds like people are looking forward to seeing that happen. I think they've seen a strong leader in Premier Ford, of course, our leader of the Ontario PC Party, and a lot of signs are pointing to returning him back to power so that we have that strong mandate to make sure that that we're able to continue those relationships and keep moving forward and make sure that Ontario's economy and Canada's economy is going to be able to be fully functioning, strong, and keep people employed and keep food on the table.
Mike Harris, thanks for coming in. And the great health announcement, which, regardless of politics, is always good to.
It's always
have,
good.
Resources going towards our health care, and all the best. Thanks for coming in, Mike.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it.
Mike Harris, the Kitchener-Conestoga MPP, talking about this announcement. It's pretty detailed, but generally speaking, some great imaging and other equipment coming to St. Mary's and Grand River, and much needed, of course. This is City News 570, or excuse me, I've just flipped back a couple of months. We like to say 570 News Radio now, because that's what we are, and we'll be back in a moment. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell today, and apologize again for the confusion on my part, because Mike Harris, you know, we sort of book ahead on certain things that we know we want to talk about on the next day's show or what have you. And we also, of course, because we're live, we want the ability to be able to pivot, you know, as things come up and talk about them, do all that kind of stuff. So all that's kind of in the plan. And again, not to belabor, but Mike Harris was scheduled, and then it's like, oh, the Mike Harris interview fell through. I don't think he's available, and okay. And then it turns out he was, and there he was. So happy to have him on our show today, and talk about the equipment coming to St. Mary's General Hospital and to Grand River, imaging equipment. It's true. I mentioned it the other day when going to visit people in the hospital and just walking the halls and going to the rooms, and just the tech that is now just so part of modern medicine. It's amazing. It's just amazing, and how much it's just necessary, you know, to have not just the imaging but the everyday. There's so much that contributes to the efficiencies of health systems. We'll want to talk next on 570 News Radio. I want to talk next about childcare, affordable childcare, $10 a day childcare. In Ontario, the staff shortages are making it very difficult for people to take advantage of affordable daycare. We have an expert on that topic, and that'll be our discussion coming up right after the news on 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Filling in for Mike Farwell all week this week. So today and tomorrow yet to go. And Mike will be back next week on this show. Of course, Mike is traveling with the team, so you'll hear him again the next Rangers game tomorrow night in Flint. So that's coming up. And a long road trip, long and far for the Rangers right now. They have one or two of these every season. Coming up at 11:30 this morning, it's our Flipside half hour. We do that every Thursday, the Flipside, where we ask you a question, usually a lighter, funner question, nothing too heavy. So today's question, your best or worst car ever. And as I said, I'll share my story after 11:30, but best and worst may, in fact, for me, be the same car. The best of car, the worst of car. Yeah. So think about that, and we'll have some fun with that after 11:30. Right now on the program, staff shortages risk this $10 a day childcare plan in Ontario. It's a multi-layered issue here, I think, but let's discuss. Our guest is adjunct professor in the Department of Applied Psychology at the University of Toronto. Amis Akbari is joining us. Professor Akbari, how are you? Here we have him now. Professor, how are you?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on about this topic. Let's talk about affordable childcare in Ontario. Staff shortages, but what is the issue coming to that? Because we had that deal with federal government that it's coming up and expired in 2026. We did receive around $13 billion. Why is the affordable daycare a challenge?
It's a challenge in Ontario because we have, as a province, paid very little attention to the workforce. This is primarily a female-dominated profession. Wages are low. Other provinces have made considerable investments in their workforce. We have 6 provinces and territories that have developed wage grids. We have provinces that have put in public pension plans and benefits. Ontario lags behind in their investments in the workforce. Wages are low. It's largely an unvalued workforce. And we're seeing the fallout of that. We're seeing recruitment and retention challenges that are following suit. So we, as a province, are not doing well compared to our other regional counterparts, and it's showing up in the quality of programming for children. We have many of our workforce that are under what is called director's approval, which means that they require qualifications by legislation, but they do not hold those qualifications. And so that's coming out in the quality of what we are doing for our children.
Don't we have some of the lowest requirements, though, as far as what it takes to be working in childcare?
No, so there's 2 different ways that we look at that. Ontario actually has one of the higher qualification requirements. So we require 2 years of a college diploma in early education. We have a lot of hours of placement that our students have to reach in order to be able to register. We have a college, it's a regulated profession. It's a protected title. So these people are qualified, they're trained, and they're accountable with the College of Professional Practice. What the issue is that the ratio of qualified staff that's required in Ontario is low. So in a classroom, there is a ratio of those that have to be qualified and those that have no qualifications as related to early learning and childcare. So that is quite low in Ontario. So already our ratio of qualified to unqualified staff is low, and now we are seeing major recruitment and retention challenges. Many of these non-qualified are directors approved and in positions that actually require a qualification, but they don't have it.
So you have to go through all this to eventually go to an industry where you're saying wages and benefits aren't keeping up. So you do all this work, you put in all this time, so you deserve a decent paying job after all that work, I guess, is the point.
Exactly. And that's where these are qualified people. These are people that have college diplomas. These are people that are registered with a professional organization. They're accountable. So there's a list of registrars, and if there's any complaints against them, it's publicly posted. So there's a lot of accountability, a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure, and yet wages are, at or below the living wage.
Now, there is a for-profit daycare industry as well. Is that where a lot of qualified people are going? Do they pay better? Is that industry, the for-profit industry, which can be very expensive for moms and dads, but is that where people are going?
No, in fact, it's the opposite.
Really?
Our study has shown, and many other studies have shown, that the for-profit sector pays the lowest wages. In Ontario, our study showed that $22, almost $23 an hour on average for-profit programs, while nonprofit are paying over $25, and public programs are paying upwards of $30. So the for-profit sector are the lowest paying positions. They are also the least likely to have non-mandatory benefits, and they are also the least likely to provide equity, diversity, and inclusion training to their workforce. So in fact, it's a cost-saving measure for those that are making profit of childcare by cutting wages of their educators.
So I assume now there's waiting lists. The parents are on long waiting lists for affordable daycare.
Yes, I mean, that expression, if you build it, they will come. Our wait lists have gone up. They've gone up because childcare is now affordable. Before it was restrictive to many that were looking at either unlicensed home care or even licensed home care, or splitting it between family, grandparents, etc. Now want a piece of licensed care. When prices go down, more people want it. And yes, the wait lists are getting longer. Many children are even aging out of childcare while on wait lists. So wait lists have gone higher, even though we are expanding. We're not meeting demand. We're not meeting the demand.
So I'm trying to understand again, going back to sort of the original points we're making here. We did get $13.2 billion to make this program. Are we saying that money wasn't invested, or enough other monies weren't invested in the province of Ontario to bring more affordable daycare?
It's a very layered issue. The money that is required to have a high quality early education system is more than what is being spent, number one. Number two, we have often a cookie cutter approach. We have a large province with huge geographical differences, huge community differences. And so many regions are not able to spend the money in the way they need to spend the money for their communities because the spending is siloed. So that's one challenge. And a lot of new builds. We've seen through our study, we've done a lot of focus groups. We've traveled across the province, including northern remote areas and francophone communities, and we see new builds, empty, beautiful classrooms that have never opened because of workforce challenges. So it does require a lot more regional understanding and not this cookie cutter approach. In Ontario, we're unique. We have 47 service system managers that are responsible, that are mandated and responsible for the delivery of early education. That's not the way it works in the rest of the country. That really allows for that unique, closer to your community understanding, but the funding needs to be flexible in order for that to be successful.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the regional aspect of it, because it's a different challenge in Toronto than it would be up in North Bay or north of that even. So, absolutely. And these shortages are really concerning at the quality level. Through our study, we've heard directors that have been forced to send children with disabilities home or de-enlist them or deny them admission because of workforce challenges. They want to include children. They want to be inclusive programs, but workforce challenges are preventing them from doing so. It is so layered, but thanks for the information here. Very insightful, Professor Akbari. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
That is their study, and that's Amis Akbari, adjunct professor in the Department of Applied Psychology at the University of Toronto, about affordable daycare. Your thoughts? Back with more in a moment on 570 News Radio.
We build it, they will come. Our wait lists have gone up. Childcare is now affordable. Before it was restrictive to many that were looking at either unlicensed home care or even licensed home care, or splitting it between family, grandparents, etc. Now want a piece of licensed care. When prices go down, more people want it. And yes, the wait lists are getting longer. Many children are even aging out of childcare while on wait lists. The wait lists have gone higher, even though we are expanding. We're not meeting demand. We're not meeting the demand.
Aging out of daycare. Wow. That's, hey, we have a daycare slot open for little Bobby. Yeah, he's 30 now. And, well, the wait lists aren't that long, but my gosh. I'm Larry Fedoruk, in for Mike Farwell. That was our guest moments ago. Amis Akbari, adjunct professor, Department of Applied Psychology, University of Toronto, and they did a study on daycare and the staff shortages right now that mean this $10 a day daycare is just not available to many people in Ontario. Ontario lagging behind in affordable daycare. Here's Mary. Mary, go ahead. You're on 570
Hi,
News
Larry.
Radio.
How are you today?
I'm good today. How are you?
Okay. Oh, I'm fantastic. I happen to be at a group celebration. Okay, let's put it that way. And I started talking to this lady girl that was there, married to my nephew. But anyway, she's in the daycare. And, of course, I'm way past daycare. My kids are 50. We didn't have daycare then, and you would remember that. But I said to her, well, saying is touting, oh, we brought the $10 daycare in and stuff like that. And I said, well, what is it like? I hear that you can't hardly get a place. She said there is a 10-year wait.
Oh, jeez.
So, as she said, most of the people are timed out before they could get a spot. Well, that's useless. That is useless.
That really is.
Larry. So I just,
Wow.
but I had the facts from a person on the ground. That's what impressed me, because you don't get the facts, or you may not get the facts. Yeah, 10 years wait. But what she said to me, Larry, was if she knew somebody, like a friend, like a relative, that needed it, she could get them in. Hey? Okay.
So there's the who you know thing happening.
Well, a little bit.
Yeah.
No, how much? But again, we don't have the workers, and as that lady said, Ontario does not pay them enough. Like, you can't demand a 2-year degree and then pay them $20.
Yeah.
And
you have to pay.
Needed. So anyway, Larry, there's the goods.
Thank you for the goods, Mary. Let's go to George. George, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio. George, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Larry?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. Your old friend, George here from Cambridge.
All right.
Yes. Larry, there's something I heard. I don't know if you heard it, too, because you asked a great question. Is it better to be in the private part where you make a little bit more money? She said no. You want to make more money in the more the public sector of daycare. And then she goes on to say, oh, yes, and they can make up to $30 an hour. Larry, I don't know about you. $30 an hour is not hurting. I don't understand why it's not attracting more young people to get into ECE college. I don't know why they can't get more people in. $30 an hour is not a bad wage at all, even this time of, these days. And if you have a partner who's making that much, $30 an hour or more, I can't see why you can't make a good living between the two of you. So that really that really made me think twice about the whole thing. Like she goes, "Oh, they're not making good money out there," but yet you can make between $21 and $30 an hour. What did you think, Larry?
Well, I think, George, I got to go for a break here, but thank you for the call. First of all, I appreciate your thoughts on this. I think that $18 an hour is a living wage in most places like Kitchener and Cambridge and Waterloo and some of the larger urban areas. So let's start there. So 30 isn't, you're not rich. Granted, if living is 18 and you're making up to 30, then that's pretty good. On the other hand, I think what the professor also said is they're not, you can make 30, but mostly people are not paying 30. They're paying closer to 20, which is now bordering on living wage. And I guess, yeah, $20 an hour is better than no job at all. But, you know, back to what Mary said, if you're going to go through education, get a degree, spend the time, there should be a better wage available at the end of it, should be paid. Yeah, maybe some of those $30 an hour are available, but there's not that many. All right. Short break, more in a moment. 570 News Radio. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. If you're just joining the show, this past few minutes we've been talking about affordable daycare study out of the U of T. We had a guest on from that study talking about the shortages, staff shortages for one, and the problem. Great comments too, great calls. I appreciate them. I know George was saying, you know, that you can make $30 an hour. You can. It's just where are those jobs? Because most of the jobs don't pay that is the problem. And I know to George's point also, if you're making $30 an hour and you're with someone who also makes $30 an hour, then you put that together, you can have a nice little life going on. True, but here's the point also, is that a lot of people making whatever, X per hour, have a spouse or partner making X per hour. But if they want to have a family, they need daycare because both people have to work. And that's it. It's not that even people want to work. They don't necessarily want to be at home taking care of family. Both people want to work. Both people have careers. They want to move on. And sometimes it's necessary that both people work. But then you got to have daycare. And if the daycare negates the second income, then what's the point? And more people either have to or want to work. So therefore, we have to have affordable daycare. So we put in a plan, and the plan's not working. I mean, is that not the short of it right there? So I don't like the fact that Ontario is lagging behind most of the other provinces on affordable daycare. Agreed, we're bigger and we have bigger challenges, but I'd like to see more attention paid to that. In our 11:30 half hour every Thursday, we do something called the Flipside. We ask you a fun question, and I hope it's fun today. We'll get back with the Flipside in just a moment on 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
We're on the flip side, catching us on the flip side. The flip side. Anytime I filled in on a Thursday for Mike Farwell, it's one of my favorite things, is the flip side, where we flip it over to you, flip the script, as I said. You know, it's just a fun question. We try and pick something fun every week and throw the question out to you. And it's what I came up with today. I don't know why I was thinking of it, but here we go. What is your best or worst car that you've ever had? We love the car, right? Love affair with the car. Most of us. And what's the best or worst one you've ever had? I'll share mine real quickly because it's the same car, best and worst. And not that you have to share both. It can be best or worst. But nevertheless, it was really my first, technically my second, but really my first car that I bought. It was my first job where I had moved to another city and absolutely had to find my own place. Couldn't just, I had lots of jobs since high school, and sometimes I had my own place and sometimes I ended up back at home. I left home, but it didn't take the first time, right? And this was like, and now I'm starting to earn some money and I got a place and I'm an adult and I'm going to buy a car. And I'm working in Winnipeg. And I buy a used, I forget the exact year, but circa 1969 Triumph Spitfire. Convertible two-seater sports car that I drive 12 months a year in Winnipeg. It was mostly red. One of the fenders was kind of faded, but if you really cleaned it up well and used a lot of wax, the entire car was all red at one time. But as soon as the wax and stuff started to fade, it was kind of orangey in one corner of the car. But good shape otherwise. So my best, because I had a red convertible sports car in my 20s, and it's the best, and it's the worst because it's winter time, and I got the top. The heater was okay if the car started. When I went to work, there was in the parking lot behind the radio station, it was a big parking lot. There was a little incline on just a slight incline on one end of the parking lot. And I'd always park there, and I'd back the car into a parking space there so that at the end of the day, if the car didn't start, I could push it downhill and then jump into it and pop the clutch and start it that way. So I could do that by myself because I had that little bit of a downhill running start, right? So, but, whatever, you're 20, 21, whatever. Life is good. You're driving a sports car. Who cares if it doesn't start occasionally? You figure it out. So it's best and worst in a lot of ways. Your best or worst car? That's the Flipside question today. And you can let me know at 519-570-2545, 519-570-2545, 1-800-570-5715, star 570 on your cell. George is here once again. George, go ahead, sir. You're on 570 News Radio. We just click on George there? See, I can't click from here, but okay, there's George. Go ahead, George.
Larry, good morning. By the way, that was a great story about your Winnipeg having that triumph and that minus 50 Winnipeg weather. I thought you were going to talk about your early 2000s Volkswagen Bug. I thought for sure you were going to talk about that vehicle.
That's the B story that I was actually going to include because that thing was a nightmare.
I remember hearing a lot of things about it. You'd say some people would tell you it's a chick car. I bought a chick car. I can't believe it. So I thought for sure you're going to bring that one up.
Well, you read my mind because I was going to bring it up, but I think the Triumph story is if I had to pick one car for best or worst, it would have been that car.
Well, I'm going to tell you mine. I've had at least 10, 11 cars in my life, and I'm driving the best one now. I'm really happy with it. It's a Honda CR-V. That thing goes and goes and goes, never stops. I'm very happy with it. I bought it used about 6-7 years ago. Just a great vehicle all around. So that's what I wanted to tell you.
All right, that's good to hear. I was, thank you, George, for the call. I felt that way about my Camry. It was the last car I had because I don't have a car now, and the Camry was just as my lease guy said. He goes, "How about a Camry?" And I was like, "I don't know, I don't like the Camrys that much." And he goes, "Have you seen the new ones?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." This was like 2018, I think. 2019, and I look at them and I go, "Wow, they look nice now. I like them now." He goes, "Well, the thing about this car is, it goes, you start it and it goes, and change the oil and you're good." And it really was reliable. And I don't mean this to be a commercial or an ad for any one particular manufacturer, but I felt that way about my Camry. It's just really reliable. Here's Angela. Angela, go ahead. You're on the flip side.
Hi.
Hi, Angela.
Hi. I was going to talk about, I bought from my brother a 1986 Volkswagen Golf, and I had that for 20 years, and I think my brother made me buy, he might have priced it up a little on me, but anyways, loved it. It was same as you. If it didn't start, I just could go on a little down and pop the clutch, and it would go. It was amazing. It hit 500,000 kilometers, and the only reason I had to sell it, I was just starting my first. I was a teacher, so I was just in my first teaching job, and I had to. I think I just gave it for parts, but it was raining on the inside of the car because of the seal around the front windshield was gone. So then I realized it was time.
Yeah.
But
at some point, how much more? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I loved it while I had it. It was awesome. And I wouldn't change anything about that. But I guess the bad part was after like 500,000 kilometers, it started raining on me inside. So
yeah,
I loved it, though. So I just wanted to share that story.
That's great, Angela. I love that story. Thank you. Yeah, they don't have windshield wipers on the inside. Otherwise, maybe you could have put up with a little bit. I don't know. Do they? They don't. No, of course they don't. One more before the break here of your best or worst car. Paul, go ahead. Paul, you're on the flip side on 570 News Radio.
1972 Triumph Spitfire.
Did you?
Drove it year-round. I had the hard top for it as well, though. So I was able to drive it in the wintertime. But, of course... those cars, it wasn't exactly stock. A few modifications to it, including a little switch on the dashboard that I could push in and hold in and then crank the engine over. And what it would do is it would disable the ignition system until the engine got turning fast enough, and then I could release it and it would fire because it just wouldn't start on a cold start in the winter. But, you think... a car like that in the wintertime, they were so much fun with that handbrake in the center, going around the corners in the slippery weather. You just crank the wheel hard, jerk up on the emergency brake, and around the corner you go.
Oh, man, I'm used to do that all the time. Driving it in the winter, and the space, even I had a rag top, but the space was so small that it did warm up and get nice and cozy inside, Yeah.
No, of course, I had the convertible for the summer and that. And although I remember time having to put the roof down in the winter time because the fellow with me was a little on the tall side. But unfortunately, it had to go.
Oh, man, my Triumph Spitfire brother. Thank you, Paul, for the call. Loved it.
The only reason it went, couldn't put a kid's seat in it.
Oh, there you go.
I always remind my son about that I had that car and it was his fault and I don't have it now. You have a great day.
You too, man. Your best or worst car ever. That's the flip side question. More of your calls when we return on 570 News Radio. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Let me know the question today on the flip side is your best or worst car ever. 519-570-2545, 1-800-570-5715, star 570 on your cell. Some great stories so far. George, who called initially, talked about, he thought I was going to say, because I used to talk about it in a previous incarnation of a show when I had this VW Beetle in circa 2000, 2002. Had it for about 5 years. Got a low mileage demo. The thing was a lemon. It like Volkswagen, great cars. We just had a story about Volkswagen Golf. I know a lot of people. I think they're like number one in the world, Volkswagen. But I just had a bad Beetle. And I think I had it for 5 years. I think it had two headlights at the same time for like 11 days. And it was $75 to change a headlight. And it never had two headlights. I learned how to do it myself. I used to buy a bulb at Canadian Tire for $8, and I learned how to replace the bulb myself because I was tired of paying $75 a pop every, and I wouldn't even change it after a while. I was like, okay, I'm gonna drive for one headlight as long as I can get away with it, and then, geez. So I used to complain about that car in my show all the time. Anyway, here's John. John, go ahead. Best or worst car ever?
Wanted to. Hello.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
I called earlier on when we were talking about Mark Carney. I just wanted to weigh in about that. I was wrong. He's not worth $95 billion, so I just want to own that one. I don't want to spread any sort of inaccurate information, but I'll throw one in on the topic. I had a friend in high school. His girlfriend had a VW. It was a Cabrio, and then Cabrio was like a rag top, and anytime it rained, the vehicle would just shut off. You could be driving down the road, and the vehicle would just shut off. And they couldn't figure it out. Eventually, they had to give her a brand new one. So I think if you get a bad VW, they're real bad.
That is it. Okay, John. Hey, and that's cool of you to call back on the Carney thing. When I finally got rid of my Triumph, I bought an MGB, and I bought a brand new one because my buddy had an MGB, still in Winnipeg, and that car also never ran when it rained. And I'm like, this is from England, where it's always raining. It's a British Leyland car. Why doesn't it work when it's it's moisture on the igniter? When spark plugs are, it was always something. Lorraine, best or worst car ever here on the flip side. Go ahead,
Lorraine.
Lorraine.
The worst here. My first car was the worst. It was a $50 Morris that I got in 1961, and it was from the mid 50s, and it had holes in the floor, and when I drove around, the heated dirt from the roadway would fly through the holes in the floor and burn my stockings. No, the other one, and I had it for a year, and I bought it for $50, and I sold it for $50 as well. So now the other one, the best one, was a '93 Saturn. It was 3 years old when I bought it. I drove it for 20 years, and it was fantastic.
Wow, I love those stories too. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Lorraine. When you can find those cars that you can just drive for that long, that is terrific. You were just reminding me too, when I was 14 or something, I still rode a bicycle. I mean, I wanted to drive, but and I wanted this new bike, and the bike was $70. And my dad said, "You save half, I'll buy you the bike." And so I did, and I got this new bike, and it was $75. And my cousin, who was 16, bought a car for $45. And I was like, damn it. Had I known, I would have had a car. Terry, go ahead. You're on the flip side here on 570 News Radio.
Hey, hi, Larry. Before I get to my car story, you had a caller yesterday talking about how people, when they go out to vote, they're impressed by how people look. He has the nice hair or the rose on the lapel. That's probably why Pierre Poilievre ditched the glasses. He'd probably get more votes with the cleaner look on his face. So.
I'm sure that was discussed in a meeting, in a focus group, and political strategists, and all the time. Yeah, sure,
absolutely. True. So that caller was definitely right. You're talking about headlights, Larry. I had a car. I just got rid of it not that long ago. It was a Chevy HHR. You had to take the front wheel off to replace the headlight bulb. That's how bad it was. It was pain in the butt. That was. No, I'm serious. You had to get at it. Wow. You had to take the front wheel off. But anyway. The best vehicle I ever had, it wasn't a car. It was a 1986 Yamaha VMAX motorcycle. I bought it new in '86, and there was nothing faster on the road at that time. And I had that bike for almost 20 years. I finally got rid of it in '05, but I never got one single speeding ticket on that bike, believe it or not. And I'm still here to talk about it. But the worst car I had, it wasn't that the car was bad. I'm like George. I probably had about 10 cars in my lifetime, but this one, the only reason I bought it new in '94 was a Mercury Cougar, '94 Mercury Cougar XR7. The only reason I didn't like that car, Larry, was because it had an automatic transmission. It was the only car I've ever owned in my life that had an automatic transmission. Every other vehicle I've had, I currently have two, and they're both manual. And believe me, Larry, trying to find a manual transmission car nowadays is next to impossible. It is hard.
I hear you.
Larry, that was my story. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the call, man. Good story. My brother, I think his car, he leases cars now. I think he leased his latest car a year and a half ago. And that's his thing. He waited for a stick. Won't drive automatic. Just won't. And I'm like, what are you waiting for? You can get a deal here. And he's like, no, I'm waiting for the stick. And it's hard. It is. So, Terry, I hear you, because I go through this with my brother all the time. A quick one before the break, if we can squeeze one more in. Here's Mike. Mike, go ahead. You're on the flip side.
Yep. Best I've ever had, a couple of them, was an M5 Miata Mazda.
Oh, yeah. And okay, that's good to hear.
The one thing that's great with them, it's balanced front and back, 50-50 weight, and drove it winter. And with that one, and mine was also manual, and they still have them in. So anybody looking for manual, you can still get them in a manual stick. But I worked at a tech company in Waterloo, winter storm came in. Nobody was able to drive in because they had an emergency at the office, had to drive in. Nobody else could drive in, so I had my Miata. And the highway was covered by at least a foot of snow. I am going up the highway, Highway 85, in a Miata with my snow tires on, passing cars. In the office, did what I had to do, come back down the highway. 2 cars passed me there. One was a Hummer and one was that car. Me, because I wasn't going as fast as what they wanted to go. They ended up in the ditch about a mile down the road. I drove by them with my car and beat my horn and waved. It was a fun car to have. And awesome with the manual stick going up the expressway ramps. You can shift down. And like I said, and I think Paul mentioned about the handbrake and stuff. It was fun, like an absolute fun car to drive, and still is.
No kidding. Okay, Mike, thanks for the call. I'm going to try and squeeze in a couple more right after our short break here on the flip side. 570 News Radio, back in a moment. Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Our question today, getting some wonderful stories, your best or worst car ever. Bill, go ahead. Bill, you're on the flip side.
Yeah, that D-Max was the fastest bike on the road, but it was only fast going straight from what I remember, like a lot of those bikes then. But I don't know if it was the best vehicle I ever had, but the best story is I was driving my dad's 1972 Ford, I think it was F-150 with a straight 6 in it, and it was in the 90s or 2000s, and someone stole it, and I lived in Chatham, and they drove it down the bank in the grass into the Thames River, and the cops seen it. They pulled it out. My dad put it in the driveway and ran diesel, fuel through it until it knocked, let it drain out, and I drove that truck for another year.
That a fact? Wow. That is a good story.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good old trucks, like the Slant 6, all those old engines, some of them were bulletproof. We had a Plymouth Valiant, the Slant 6, that thing would go forever and ever. But I think
my dad.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. My dad bought at some point when I was a kid. He bought forget the year, but it was a flat 6. I think it was a Merc, a half-ton truck, used. That thing was fun to drive. What do they call it when the standard shift is on the column? It's 3 on a tree, or is that what they call it? Anyway, it was one of those. Debbie, go ahead. You're on the flip side.
Hi. My favorite car was my first one. I lucked out because my grandpa had turned 80 and he was giving up his car, but I had 3 older siblings. So fortunate for me, the oldest one already had a car, and the next 2, they didn't have their driver's license, and I was only 18, but by default I got it. It was a 66 Rambler, American Rambler, and it was a standard. It was a standard, which I didn't know how to drive a standard, so my dad drove me from Kitchener to Kingston. I had a 1-hour lesson at the in a big parking lot down there on how to drive a standard, and then I had to follow him home through stop and go through Toronto by myself, and managed to do that without ruining the transmission. And then I was on my own from there on. But what I really loved about it was I used to go camping in the summer with my friends, and it had the seats that laid straight down. You could sleep. So you could sleep in the car,
there you go.
Worked out really good because we partied co-ed, and lots of the guys would get a little bit too rambunctious at night. So I always had a safe place to go and sleep. And my grandpa, he died the night of the blizzard of 1978. So that we just passed that a few days ago. And I'm so grateful to him for that Rambler and for being able to learn to drive a standard. So anyway.
Great story. Debbie, thank you. Thank you. I'm so late here on for the news, but thank you. If you still have a car story, it's our 12 o'clock Talkback Hour next. We can move it to that, 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage outside. Or you don't go out Friday night.
11:30 noon. Our Flipside question was your best or worst car ever. If you still have a story there, you can share it now because it's wide open. You can talk about anything you want to talk about. Or the provincial election or the federal Liberal leadership race or the tariffs or anything that's in the news or on your mind. I'm not limiting it to those topics. I'm just throwing stuff out there, whatever you want to talk about. It's your hour here every hour, every noon to 1, I should say, during the week here on the Mike Farwell Show. I am Larry Fedoruk. Mike will be back on this slot next week. So, and I'm sorry for being late for the news there at noon, but Debbie had such a great story and about the car she got from her grandfather, and it was a standard, so she had to learn how to drive standard. I didn't, being a kid raised in Saskatchewan, you would think I would know how to drive a standard. I did not. Got my driver's license on our big Pontiac cabin cruiser car. Like they were huge, right? And it was an automatic. And then my dad bought a second car. It was a Volkswagen Bug. And he calls me from the dealership. And it was supposed to be kind of my mom's car, but it would, de facto, I have a car now, the second car. So he's at the dealership. He says, come pick it up and you can have the car for the afternoon. And I'm like, yeah. So I take the bus down to the dealership. My dad's on a lunch break. And there's the car. And he goes, okay, take the car. See you tonight. And I get in the car and it's a standard. And I'm like, I don't know. I sort of know the principle of how to drive a standard, but I don't know how to drive one. And I'm like, Dad, and I don't want to say anything. So I can drive it. And I bounced that thing out of the parking lot and just bounce it and grind it down the street. I could just, I don't know whether it happened or it's the picture in my mind of my dad in the rearview mirror, just his face in the palm of his hand going, what have I done? But that's how I learned, just the hard way. Anyway, enough of my stories. Andre, go ahead. You're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Good afternoon, Larry.
Hey, Andre.
I got a couple of things here, but it's funny because we could talk all day about, boys and their cars and their toys, right? But me, as long as it was under $1,000, because back then you got books that under $1,000, a hammer and a screwdriver. You burn it down, you beat it, and you just sell the pieces, right? We had so many good cars back, with the metal cars. I like Terry's story, right? With his bike, he said he never got a ticket probably because he was, they couldn't catch up to him. He seems pretty clever. But my other thing I want to say, Larry, is about Paul Fixer. Oh boy, his ears are stretching. What's going on? I thank him very much for giving me the vision because of my blindness. I did play some hockey, long tour bus, and friends in Quebec side of BTB, and we used to cross to Sault Ste. Marie. And he was saying, driving there and seeing the snowbanks just so high up, and just gives you an idea and how the next day, just boom, they clear up so quick. They're used to it. But it was crazy amazing to see that snowbank just on top of you, just like, wow, like you're looking at 5-6 feet where you can't even look, be bypassed. And I thought one time that it was Paul Fixer's birthday. I thought it was 70, but I couldn't believe that this guy is like so popular besides his 2 rings because he was an assistant coach. But he's also on Google. So if you research Paul Fixer, it will tell you his age. I couldn't believe that. Like, wow, he's so popular. Mm-hmm. Have a good day, Larry.
All right, Andre. Thanks for the call. Here's Grant. Grant, go ahead. You're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Yeah, you kind of cracked me up with their driving your dad's car.
I'm glad you like the story.
I think if I did that with the car, I think Dad would give me a lecture. But yeah, did you watch the Ranger game last night? Or yeah.
I did not. I had other commitments.
commitment. Come on, they're the Rangers. They're the.
I know. Sorry.
They're the
Just
impossible team. Yeah, I went to 15 rounds of the shootout, and I don't know what it is with these manufacturers with cars with lights. I used to replace I think it was a Chevy Nova, small little car, but I could never get it aligned. So one light would be hitting the sky. It's like
right. Yeah. That was the thing. Grant, thanks for the call, man. Thanks for the call. That was the thing about my Volkswagen where I had to. I learned how to replace the light myself. The one thing is the unit was a whole unit that came out, and then you opened up the unit and you replaced the bulb and then locked the unit back in. So it was always fixed. So you didn't have to worry about alignment, at least not in the early 2000s. And now if you Google stories, there's lots of stories about halogen headlights right now, how they're causing glare and if you have this experience where you're driving at night and it's like, is that guy on high beams or what is that? And they're not. It's just these new type of headlights that some people are saying now may not be as safe as they should be. Bob, go ahead. Bob, you're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Hi there. It's actually Rob. Sorry.
Rob, sorry. That's my eyes. My fault. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Accidents happen. I have just a quick question. And, my favorite car, honestly, also was my first car I ever driven. My grandfather brought two 1956 BMW Izettas over from Germany.
Oh, wow.
When he spent time over there being a soldier and stuff like that. Anyways, it had one door. It was one cylinder, go 56 kilometers an hour. It was a pretty unique car, and that was my first car I ever driven, and that's my favorite car. But my question is also, I hear all these news saying how much fentanyl is coming from Canada to the United States. I want to know how much drugs is coming from the United States into Canada, because that's never talked about. If you can answer me those questions, that would be awesome. But thanks, Paul.
All right, Rob. You know what? It's interesting. I heard the numbers, and the numbers are out there. And the number that doesn't compare or come close is the amount of fentanyl, and they know this, but what they've busted. Okay, it's not necessarily that they're able to know exactly how much comes in. These are estimates, but the amount of fentanyl they've busted from Canada going into the States is minuscule compared to the amount of fentanyl that comes from Mexico into the United States. And then, of course, as a caller pointed out previously, we have this sort of West Coast where it comes in also from the Asian continent. So, I don't know that fentanyl it seems like kind of a smokescreen for trade tariffs, doesn't it? Like, because of that, really? It's the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll return with more of your calls on 570 News Radio. I'm Larry Fedoruk in for Mike Farwell. Whatever you want to talk about, it's the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour at 519-570-2545, 1-800-570-5715, or star 570 on your cell. Francis, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Yes, and how are you today, Larry?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Very good. My very best car ever was a 67 Ford Fairlane with a 289 engine with a Cruise-O-Matic transmission. I sold it when it was close to 500,000 miles, not kilometers, but miles. I used to average my speed at 90 miles an hour, which is quite fast nowadays. Changed the oil every 6,000 miles, and I've never had any problems with the car other than that it would blow the headlights out every now and then when I went over a puddle. But I could change the headlight, no problem at all. And I only really got one ticket. It's when I passed a whole lane of cars, and at the very front was an OPP. How do you like that for one?
There you go. I can just picture your face, the realization when you see that last car, and you're like, "Oh no!"
Oh, well, I use a different word, but I won't say it over the air. But
There you
like I
go.
say,
Yeah,
that car just kept on going and going and going.
the old I remember the 289. I think they had a 302 at some point as well. Ford did.
Because
the 289 was huge for years.
They went from the 289 to the 302 because they weren't selling enough parts on the 289. You couldn't kill the 289.
There you go. Right, of course. Hey, great story, Francis. Thanks. Best and worst car was our Flipside question. So if you got, as I said, if you got some of those leftover stories, you can dump them in here on our 12 o'clock Talkback Hour because it's your choice in this hour. What do you want to talk about, whether it's that or anything, really? Here's Cora. Cora, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes, I'm complaining today about the Kitchener-Waterloo record. I have missed the paper so many times, and I have trouble getting through. I can't get to talk to anybody that'll tell me anything, and I didn't get a paper again on Monday and Tuesday of this week.
Well, all right. If anybody from the record is listening, there you go.
Well, I hope so, because I'm ready to cancel. I mean, I enjoy the paper. I'm in my 90s, and it's something to read for at least 10 minutes, and the puzzles and that, and it's just disgusting. So I called a couple of numbers, and I got Hamilton Spectator and everybody but Kitchener Record. Then they want push 1, push 2, push 5. Well, I just want to talk to somebody. Okay?
Right. Thank you, Cora. I'm glad we were able to listen, and you were talking to us. So frustrating. Customer service is just as soon as they, check our website, call our 800 number or whatever. That is just an excuse. I'm not talking about the record. I'm talking about anybody, whether it's a box of macaroni or a service, your cable, whatever it is. As soon as they say customer service is our website, and you go there and there's FAQs and you're like, well, no, that's not. None of these are my question. Could you please just put me to a person? And if occasionally, if you get these places where a person answers and you talk to the person, it's like, wow, did I just go back 30 years of customer service? Because customer service, generally, in my opinion, in the big picture, across all categories, sucks. We have to improve customer service. There you go. What are you thinking about? What do you want to talk about? It's 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. Returns in a moment. This is 570 News Radio. And I'm Larry Fedoruk, sitting in for Mike Farwell this week, sitting in on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. Here's Imran. Go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. So just to give you a background, like last few program, I was calling in and I was talking about the vision of the Canadian leaders. So I'm thinking I would like to continue on that topics for the next few programs. So about the vision of the Canadian leaders, what it should be and where they should focus more. So today I just picked the topics on healthcare. So I was looking at some data, one survey by Fraser Institute on the OECD countries that has universal healthcare system around the world, like USA, Belgium, France, Canada, UK, those countries. And data is saying that among 38 countries, Canada spend a lot of money. They're ranking fourth in this world. But in terms of getting results like doctors or wait time or surgery wait time, Canadian data is performing very poorly, like around 27 to 28 rank among the 38 countries. So it shows that we have the money, but we are not spending in the right sector or right way, I think. So I think the solution would be is to set up a emergency task force, which or a war room type thing, which comprise of the politicians, doctors, social workers, even the people from the civil society, they should make a plan and work on that. I think they should pinpoint where we need to spend more money. How can we get more doctors? Seems to me like now is just days in, days out. Nobody's really thinking. They are talking, a lot of talking going on, but not much action. So I never saw like our wait time actually developed in the last 10 to 15 years. So I hope they're going to take a very like precise actions urgently. That would be my wish and vision for Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Great call, Imarin. I appreciate that. And I agree. And I know there's this, the back goes up a little bit when you think task force. Ooh, another government committee, another government spending, and nothing's going to come of it. I would agree, though, a task force. But here's the issue as I see it, Imarin, and you should look at this, is there's a Health Canada. And a Health Canada deals with pandemic issues, for example, things like that, a lot of big issues. And there's money that comes from the feds to the provinces for health care. But then health itself is a provincial issue. And it's going to vary from Alberta to Ontario to Nova Scotia. It's going to vary from Southern Ontario to Northern Ontario, the needs, the strategies, which a task force could address. But you can't seem to get a federal for Canada as a country to say this is the kind of country we want to be when it comes to healthcare. That's fine if you want to have this policy and we're going to have universal healthcare and we're going to be this and this is the way Canada is going to be. But then you just pass it off to the provinces and say, okay, what do you want to do in Alberta? What do you want to do? And if you get a guy coming along like Doug Ford that basically wants to privatize our healthcare and take our healthcare system away, then there's a problem, right? So I don't say give it back to federal jurisdiction. I understand why it has to be a provincial jurisdiction, but maybe that's where a task force looks at how to wed those two forms of government a little better. More of your thoughts, and Herta, you're going to be next. Thanks for holding. When we get back with the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour here on 570 News Radio.
Here's special guest host, Larry Fedoruk.
More of your calls on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. The topic is your choice, and I thank you for holding Herta. Is it Herta? Herta? How would I say this properly?
Yes, you are saying that properly. It's Herta, yes. And
okay.
I like to say something about Reliance Home Comfort, and it is a complaint. And what happened, it could happen to other people too, and this is maybe an eye-opening. I sold the house because my husband had passed away, and I sold the house last August, and I phoned all the companies that we have moving, and we are moving, and that the service is no longer needed. And so everybody was fine with that. It canceled except Reliance. And I didn't hear anything. I phoned them at the beginning of August that I would be moving the middle of September. I did not hear anything back. So I wrote them a letter with the address that was on the envelope. Didn't hear anything back. And then came the note from the bank. I could see that they were still taking money out. So I went to the bank because I thought this was the only way that I could reach them, and I canceled direct payment. And then they phoned me, and they said,
yeah, then they call you, yeah.
Yes, then they phoned me, and they said in order to go ahead with it, they would need a death certificate that shows that my husband had passed away. And at this point now, I must also say the agreement with Reliance, on that agreement was my husband's name only, not my name. So they said they did need the death certificate. I'm all nervous now because they made me so upset this morning when they phoned again. They needed a certificate in order to show them that I am my husband's or was my husband's wife. So I did send them that too. So now I got another phone call this morning. Now they want another piece of paper, and they call it the executor document. And if I am not able to send them this, they cannot close the account. Now,
are you the executor, by the way?
Yes, I mean, the house itself was in my name at that point because we had that changed. And so whatever else from my husband, it went to me automatically. But I never thought, I mean, it was my house, and I never thought that I had to go any further for them to cancel the account. They just don't want to let it go. And at that point now, I am going to phone my lawyer because I find they are sort of aggravating me. I mean, I am 84 years old, and you would think they would take that into consideration, but no, they do not.
All right, Herta, thanks for the call, and I hope somebody hears this and responds to this case. I appreciate the call. My mom passed away a couple of years ago, and my brother and I, she's 94, wonderful, all that. I've talked about it on the show before, but my brother and I were the executors of her estate, and she had a will, and it stated that, and we still used a lawyer because it is complicated. So I've been through a lot of that. It does most of the areas that I had to deal with. As soon as I proved I was executor and shared a copy of a death certificate, it was done. So I don't know what's going on with that. That just sounds a little over the top as far as that goes. But I don't know all the details. But as presented, it sounds a little over the top that they would continue for more papers, more proof, more this, more that. I tell you, though, so this is all those ads I used to see is like, get a will. I never had one. And when my brother and I went through all my mom's stuff, she had legal papers and we were the executors, and it's still such a, like, so I went and got a will right after that, man, because it's like, it's already a problem, never mind just mourning and loss of a human being. The paperwork, and I guess as it should be, is complicated, and absolute proof. You can't just, well, someone's dead, okay, I take your word for it. It should be complicated, but at the same time, there is a system in place. Anyway, Kyle, go ahead. You're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Hello, Larry. I'm sorry I confused you for Rob Snow.
Did you?
Are you there?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I thought it's usually Mike Farwell on, and then sometimes people fill in. I guess it's you. I've listened for a long time, first-time caller, so forgive my nervousness, but the main reason I called in was about that 90-year-old lady that called in about her paper missing. And that was 2 days, Monday, Tuesday this week. We've had a lot of snow and bad weather, and I actually do snow removal, and I've a few times picked up a newspaper inside a bag that a car has thrown into the driveway as opposed to onto the porch, maybe where it's supposed to be deposited or delivered. So there's a chance the paper just went missing in the snowbank. That's a great point. And as for the Reliance thing, I've actually installed water softeners with a Culligan subcontractor, and he didn't have very nice things to say about Reliance. He specifically said they rip off old ladies. So that's very concerning to hear. And as far as they want her birth certificate and this and that, think of all the scams going on and what they're going to do with that information. So I would, yes, she said it should be a cautionary message or tale. So,
all right. Thank you, Kyle. I don't want to thank you, Kyle, for the call. I don't want to implicate Reliance for things that just anecdotally that people are saying, but it's legitimate to want a death certificate when somebody's name is on a contract, whether it's Reliance or whether it's a credit card or a bank account or whatever it is, and they pass away, then you can't just call and say, hey, cancel that guy's account. He was my husband. He was my brother. They're dead. So no, you need to provide proof. So on some of those things, are they being over the top and then we need this, then we need this? I don't know. But some of that stuff where you have to prove that the individuals, I think that's necessary stuff. One more before the break here on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour, and it's Jack. Jack, go ahead. You're on 570 News Radio. And we just get Jack up here. All right, there he is. Jack, go ahead, sir.
Hello. Good afternoon, Larry.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm not bad. My worst car, I liked it, but I had a blue Mercury Capri, and the thing that was bad about it was every time it rained, water would get in the distributor cap area, and it wouldn't start.
Yeah,
and
I've heard this about. Yeah,
just the
and there
problem,
again,
like
really an English-based car. The Capri was really sort of borrowed from an English Ford, wasn't it?
I'm not exactly sure. I was young when I had that car and stuff like that. Well, old enough to drive, but I was in my 20s.
Right.
And stuff. But I took it to a mechanic, and they told me how to fix the problem. All you do is spray WD-40 on the distributor cap, and that will not allow the water to go into where the spark plugs and stuff are.
Right.
So that worked and stuff, but it was a problem until I got it fixed or whatever, knew what to do, stuff like that. So, okay, have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Jack. It's so funny. My brother and I were just talking about the Capris, how it was kind of a cool looking car back in the day, the Capri, and a friend of mine had one. I used to borrow it occasionally. And then as we're talking about it, they just introduced a 2025 Capri. Just Google it. It's a cool looking car. So they're bringing back that brand. This is the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour on 570 News Radio. I'm Larry Fedorkin for Mike Farwell today, and we'll be back with more in a moment. Larry Fedorkin for Mike Farwell, taking your calls, whatever you want to talk about. Here's Andre. Andre, go ahead.
Hey, hi, Larry. Thank you. I find something harder than not spending money is not having a talkback hour from the Kitchener Rangers with Farwell and Paul. Like, they are part of our life in Kitchener and Waterloo. And, like Tanner Lamb, since last year, he's my favorite. Even if the other guys are producing well and all that stuff. But Tanner Lamb, he reminds me of Saku Koivu in my blindness. And another thing I want to mention is Andre. Sorry if I can't say it properly because I can't read, but Matt Andrianowski, I think his name is.
Okay.
He's really making me upset. I'm going to be polite. Because he's getting penalties in the offense. He's getting penalties, nonsense. I don't think he deserves to be captain. I think somebody like Mercer deserves, and what's his name, the new guy. I think it's Mashar, whatever his name is. He's getting up there too. But I don't know. He's just getting nonsense penalties. And they did say games ago that, Paul said that he's playing with fire. And even if we won the 2 points, like, the playoffs are coming. You can't be like that, right? Letting your team down or getting nonsense penalties. So that's what I wanted to say. So go Rangers. I don't know when's the next game. So if you can help me out before the show's over, you take care, Larry, and everybody out there, be safe.
All right. Thank you, Andre. Next game. Is that what he said? When's the next game? Tomorrow night. Flint. They're in Flint tomorrow night. And then London. Now because yesterday I thought it was the first game of the 4-game trip, but it was the second game of a 5-game trip. So Flint is 3, London's 4. Okay. But tomorrow night, Flint, with Mike Farwell and Paul Fixter. Tom, go ahead. You're on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour.
Hello. How you doing, Larry?
I'm good, Tom. How are you?
Good, bad. You were talking about the Capri, the Ford Capris, when they first came over from England. They were smaller, they were long front end, short in the back, right? On the trunk.
Yeah, area. I like the look. My buddy's was red with the black vinyl top. I loved it, and I love the wheels.
Yeah, and then they sort of went over and came to the Mustang style, if you remember those ones correctly as well.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then, but having owned a few Fords in my time, and I just found this kind of funny about talking to other Ford owners and that they had some issues with their solenoid and with distributors and starters. And to your last, the other caller previously, sometimes I had to use a screwdriver to turn the ignition over on the solenoid, believe it or not, and then spraying the WD-40 was dispersing the moisture into off your wires, right? That's what's supposed to help it in that.
Right. Yeah.
But the Ford Capri was a really nice car, especially when you put a little 302 in it. It was kind of fast.
Oh yeah, that's what I loved about my buddy. He let me borrow it once in a while, and I just loved how fast his was. And Tom, look up the 2025 Capri. It's a good-looking car. They've just introduced it like weeks ago.
Yeah. We will do. The other one you guys will sort of look at is the German Merkur that came over, if you remember. It's sort of the sister car to the Taurus when they brought it over from Germany. Another nice automobile. Thanks for calling.
It was.
Thanks my call. Thank you,
man. I remember that car. I didn't know. I thought it was the Merc version of the Taurus, but I didn't realize it came over from Germany. All right. Learn about cars. This is a holdover from our Flipside question about what's your best or worst car ever. So I love the car stories as well. One more before a short break. Terry, go ahead. You're on the Talkback Hour.
Hey, hi, Larry. I'm calling back about the Mercury Capri and about the previous caller with the Mercure. Yeah, it was built in Germany, but they used that 2.3 turbo engine. It was the same engine they used in the Mustang SVO. Remember that car in the mid '80s?
A little bit, yeah. I wasn't a big fan of the Mustang in the '80s. So
yeah, it was the same. They used the same body as the Mustang GT, but it was they used a different engine and they called it the SVO. But it was the same engine as that Mercure. But I had two Mercury Capris, but they were the '79, both of them. One had the turbo RS, and the other one was just a 5-liter. But in '79 they went to the they used the same body as the Mustang, the Fox body. But before that, the one that started in the 70s, I think you're right. I assume that they were developed in Germany, but you might be right about Britain. But it was a completely different car, and they had a lot of issues with those. So that's why I thought maybe when the fella called about the distributor cap, that's probably one of the issues. But they were nice-looking cars, but they had a lot of mechanical issues. Anyway, Larry, thanks for taking my call again. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thanks, man. All right, 570 News Radio, back in a moment. And in our last few moments here, it's Larry Fedoruk sitting in for Mike Farwell, barring any unforeseen circumstances, filling in one more day tomorrow. And Mike's on the long road trip with the Rangers, as you know, and we'll be back in this slot on Monday. But it's Larry in for Mike. And great calls today on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour and the Flipside. Our Flipside question today at 11:30 was your best or worst car ever. A lot of great car stories came out of that because, we remember driving was I don't know if it still is as big a deal, but it's a big deal to get to that 16 and get that driver's license and get that car, borrow the family car. Maybe you get a car handed down, or in my case, we had my dad, our second car, I should say, was, what year was this? Would have been 1960 Zephyr, Ford Zephyr, but it was made in England. So it was an English looking car. But the steering wheel was on the left. And that was our second car. It's kind of a cool car. And then the Volkswagen. There was a thing, and it wasn't one last car story, and then I'll let you go. But it wasn't so much my age group a thing, but in my brother, who's younger than me, in his group, it was his friends used to get these things called beaters, a beater car for the winter, or sometimes that was they'd get a beater, and you'd get a car for as little money as possible. It had to at least run, or they could make it run, and then you'd duct tape and sometimes literally piece the thing together and drive it as long as you could drive it. And it was just your beater car. And my brother's stories, friends of his are driving their beater car and the cops pull them over because the car's like missing this and it doesn't have this. And the cop pulls them over and finally says, this car's not roadworthy. I can't let you drive this car. And the guy goes, okay. reaches into the glove box, gets a screwdriver, undoes the license plates, puts them under his arm, gets on a bus and leaves, just abandons the car on the spot. Okay. I always love that story. The beater. Anyway, more tomorrow on the Mike Farwell Show. Enjoy your day. We'll talk soon.